Alright, in this section of the video I'm going to show you how to validate our form. So in the previous parts we have created our form, it looks like this, we've put it online, we've sent the email, but that was sort of super basic. This is not, and here's the PHP code, this is not secure yet. So what people can do is hack a form like this by putting special characters in. So we're going to do a couple of different things. The first method of form validation is given by the browser, so it's done on the front end. And you can do some form validation on the back end for all these, but it really just requires one word to make sure that people are forming all the things that you need them to form on the front end so that they don't even get to the submit process. So let me show you. So the first thing, we need to decide, are these things required or not? And in HTML5 we have form validation inside the forms themselves. So if you want to have a required field for this input and you want it to be required, all you have to do is put the word required. It's actually that easy. So we're just going to make all of these to be required. And then when we submit, these have to be filled in. If they're not filled in, then you're going to get an error from the browser itself. So I'm using Google Chrome, and you can see here that it's telling me please fill out this field. Right? That tells me that it's required. If this were not required, and you can see when I hover over it, I don't get the same thing. But when this is required, it tells me please fill out this field. So there are some prompts just being given from the they're being given from the browser itself about being required. Let's actually take the requirement off the message. So people probably are going to write a message if this is just your basic contact form. But the reality is not everyone wants to send you a message. So let's say I just input my name and I try to submit it. The browser is going to catch it because this is a required field. It's going to catch this right here, and it's not going to allow me to submit that. I can try as many times as I want, but it's not going to submit that form. Now if I put in an email address but I don't have a name, we're going to get the same error, but just in the different field. It'll tell us to fill out the field. Okay. If I put in my name but no message, then the form should go through. Okay, it's not connected online, so it's not going to actually do anything, but you can see that it's trying to take the action. Now if I mistype an email address, nope. Okay, so it's letting, let me see. Let's see if we can get it. So if I try to do this, it'll definitely catch it. So it'll tell me that it needs to include an @ in the email address. Now it's a little bit funky because it's not telling me about the .com. So maybe that's something that can be checked for later. So it'll allow this to go through, which is not perfect validation. And we can check for that inside of our PHP. I'll show you how to do that. But whenever it's the form is filled out with the required fields, it does go through. Okay, so that's our first level of validation, is in the form itself. All you have to do is put the required, and all major browsers support this. It's an HTML5 specification, so browsers are into HTML5, so they're going to support all this. So that's our first line of defense. The second line of defense comes inside of our PHP code. Now I'm going to show you a function, and I'm going to I take the function from the w3schools.com, and it shows you how to validate a PHP form. And what we're going to do is we're going to run this function right here. I'm just going to copy and paste that because I think that's something that you can do as well. So we put it right here outside of our if statement. So if the server request method is post, so if the form is posting, that's the method for the form, then we're going to apply all these values from our form inputs. We're going to apply them to our variables and make the name, email, and message variable have something in them. Now, once that information comes to us, we need some way to test that data that's coming through the input. And it explains it here. So the HTML special characters function, it gets rid of some of these special characters. It makes this, instead of being shown to be code like if someone types this in, then it will actually come out and put some sort of JavaScript. It'll hijack the form and put some JavaScript in there. So what we want to do is we want to eliminate these special characters. Okay, so if we do that, then it sort of kicks it back out to look like this. So once we put the HTML special characters, this is what it will come out looking like. And then the attempt to inject something into the page itself is just going to be, it's just going to go away because it can't execute those characters. Okay, so this is the HTML special characters function, and we're going to run that on our data. So we're actually gonna replace data here with this post with the input, just like you see here. So if the server method is post, then take name and fill it with this variable. But as this comes in, we're actually going to test that input, and we're going to trim it. We're going to strip the slashes, and we're going to replace this HTML special characters, and then we'll return that. And then that data, that returned input value, is what's going to be here for our name. So we're just going to sort of strip out the junk. If anyone wants to try to do that, we're going to strip that out, and we're only going to have text, so white space and text. It explains it here, stripping unnecessary characters, so extra space and tabs and new lines out of the user input data. That's the trim function. And then we remove the backslashes with the strip slashes function. So these are all ways that someone can try to hack your form. So we're just trying to do what we can to make sure that bots or people aren't trying to mess up our forms. Excuse me. All right, so let's just put this into action, and you can see here what we're doing. So we're just going to use this test input function, and we're just going to put it right here at the beginning, and then we're going to wrap this in parentheses. So it's going to look just like this. So when the server request comes in, we're going to test this input first, test the we're going to test the value first, and then if it passes all these tests, or it goes through this process sort of cleaning, that's what it's doing, then whatever comes out on the other side, this data that comes out on the other side, we're going to apply it to name. Okay, so that's all that's happening through this process. So we just set this up for each of our inputs. Okay, and so now we are stripping out all the junk that could be coming. It could be coming into our email. There's some other validation in here. So this is, you know, if the value is empty, then you can throw an error and say, hey, this is required. That's essentially what we're doing here by putting these required. So with the email and with the name, you know, those things are required. If the website, for this form, if the website value is empty, then you just don't put anything. So website is equal to nothing. And then same thing, if there's no comment, then you just set the comment equal to nothing. Okay. And we will do we'll do that for our message. Since our message is not required, we'll say if empty, and then it's going to be post, and it's going to say message. So if this is empty, then set message is going to be equal to nothing. Okay. Else we want to test the message. Okay, so we'll just set that one if statement in there. So if the value for message is empty, then we set message to nothing, right? Else, if it's not empty, then we want to test that input, and then we want to set it into the message variable. Okay. And then if you do set up those errors like this, then it shows you how to go back into your form, and you just set basically a little placeholder in there that has that variable, and when that variable gets set, like email error gets set, then it inputs this right into here. So it echoes it out. It shows the user there's an error here. But again, we're doing a lot of that validation on the front end, okay, through our required. One thing I do want to do, because we ran into that issue with the email, is I want to set up a special function to test for email. Okay, so validating email in a URL. We don't have a URL in our form, but we do have an email. And PHP comes with something called the filter variable. And we can filter the email variable, and we can set it to validate the email. So we filter it and make sure that the email is valid, and then kick it back. Now, I'm not going to go through all the machinations of this because I'm not necessarily setting up this form for real, but I would say if how will we do this? If we'll just do this part right here, because we already have this being tested. So we'll just run this. Not as an if statement here, but down here, sorry. Okay, put these two together. So we can just put that in here like this. So if the filter, we're going to run this filter on email, and if it doesn't validate, then we want to do something here. Okay, and we'll just say invalid email format. We can come down here and we can put a new, we can just say error, and then inside of that well, it's going to be hard because it's not all done in PHP, they're assuming that you're doing this PHP form all together in one. You're doing it on the same page, so the PHP is actually like up here on the same page in the head. But since we're not doing that, I'm just showing you, I guess, how it works. So if you want to validate using PHP, you can do it that way. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, so I'm just showing you a little bit of validation here. And let me think. There's also a way to do some honeypot issues. So if you want to look into creating a honeypot for your form, which is essentially you would put it, let's say right here or somewhere in the form, and if a robot comes here and just fills out the form and then clicks submit, then it can fill out whatever information and just spam you to death. If you put a honeypot, which is a hidden element in there, like a hidden input, and it's required, or it's not required, it can't be required. So if you put a hidden input in there and a robot comes, it's going to fill out all the inputs whether they're hidden or not, and then you just write a little JavaScript that says if this form is filled out, if there's a value in there, then don't submit, and it prevents the form submission. It doesn't hurt the robot's feelings because it's a robot. So that's one way to do that. So we're just going to leave this. If the message is empty, we're going to set the message to empty, and if it's not empty, then we're going to test it. We're going to run it through our cleanup down here, and then we're going to set it as a message. Okay, so this should work, and on I'm going to push this off the screen. I'm going to push it up to my server, and then we'll check it again. So let's get this over here, and I'll just I'll do it off screen. What I love about PHP Forms is that it's a super easy way to put some sort of contact information into an HTML website. If you're using WordPress, you're still going to be dealing with HTML and HTML forms and consequently the same PHP code, but they have their own methods that they use, and they have there's all kinds of plugins that you can use for those types of things. So it's not necessarily it's not quite as necessary when you're using, there are different ways to get around it when you're using WordPress. But if you're using building just an HTML site, then you are going to need to add your own validation. You're going to need to sort of add your own mail script so that you can use that, unless you're using a mail script from someone else. Okay, so let's go to let's go to our basic form. Okay, now I have uploaded the mail script, and I re-uploaded the index file too because we changed our required fields here. So let's just put those in, and we'll try to submit. Okay, so we're getting our first field validation here. It's telling me fill out my name, and I try to submit without an email. I had to fill that out. And then I have this, so let's try to submit it. Okay, so it didn't kill it. it went through, and let's try to open. I'll look in my email and see if it came through. It's not showing up very well. Yeah, it's taking a minute because the screen capture. I find that tends to slow things down quite a bit. Okay, well, that's now loading in. Sorry, it's taking Gmail a minute to load here. Okay. So we have our form submission here. You can see it was submitted 2 minutes ago. It's coming in. Everything is valid and validated, and we caught a lot of those errors on the front end, and then on the back end you can see that it came through. We can try just so that you can see it in live action. And this is a test of the validation. Okay, so we'll submit that. Form is still working. We'll go back and we'll see if it's come through. Don't need these things. And there it goes, right there. So it comes through pretty quickly. So this is a test of the validation. Okay, so you can see that our form works, comes through, no big deal, and everything works just like it should. So that's a validated form, and we have our front end validation here, and then we have just a little bit of back end validation. Again, if you go to the w3schools.com, I've essentially pulled my my main like very validated PHP form handler, this mail.php. I've pulled that almost directly from here, so that, you know, if you used all of this, like if you had a URL and you were checking your URL to make sure that it is a valid website, and you were checking email to make sure, then you could do that just as well. And I've used this on production websites before, and it's pretty bulletproof, so it's a really good thing. And if you want to look into more security for your forms, look into either using Google reCAPTCHA or using honeypots, or all the above, depending on how much spam you're willing to live with. Alright, that's the end of this video. I hope it's been long, but I hope it's been really good for you to see the whole process of building a form. This is one of the key things that you're going to be dealing with, and one of the biggest pain in the neck things that you have to deal with. So hopefully this makes it pretty simple. Once you get it all set up, it's a matter of just sort of mixing and matching and changing these inputs to capture the inputs from your form. So whatever those are, you're able to capture those values. And there's some different things along the way that you'll learn, but this is the basics, and this is sort of the stuff that you need to have in your mind if you're going to be actually doing production level forms. So if you have any questions about this, please leave them in the comments below. If I've misspoken or mistyped something, let me know so I can fix it. Other than that, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.